start now. Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar, Planning for Mobile Learning Strategies for Success. Before I pass things off to our moderator, I'm going to do a few housekeeping items. To start, this webinar is being recorded, so you will get a copy of the slides and the recording in an email in the next couple of days. And two, there's going to be a Q&A panel at the end of the webinar. So if you have any questions for the panelists, please use the Q&A box in the lower right-hand side of your screen or the chat box. So now I'm going to pass things off to Dennis.
Thanks, Liz. Welcome, everybody, to today's event on planning for mobile learning. My name is Dennis Pierce, and I'm the editorial director for eSchool News. We have two really terrific speakers for you today, and each will be approaching this talk from a slightly different perspective. We hope you will leave this event with some practical advice for making mobile learning a success in your own schools and districts. As Liz mentioned, after both panelists have had a chance to speak, I'll be leading a Q&A session at the end. Please feel free to leave your questions for either or both speakers at any time using the question or chat features at the bottom of your screen, and I'll do my best to try to get to those questions at the end. Our first speaker today is Tracy Parrish. She is the Education Marketing Strategist for Verizon Wireless. During her time at Verizon, Tracy is focused on mobile learning services for education, and she brings a broadly knowledgeable industry perspective to today's discussion. Please welcome Tracy Parrish.
Thanks so much, Dennis. I really appreciate getting the opportunity to share with everyone here today. Before we hop in, I want to let you know that I'm actually talking to you today from the Digital Promise Conference, which is a mobile learning event out in Arizona. And I just got to tour one of their innovative schools out here where every student in the district, in their case, is using a laptop, and got to see some live interaction with students in the classroom and hear all of their feedback about connectivity in the community and everything. It's been a great experience, and really gives us a great setting to be able to talk to you today about planning for mobile learning. So just to jump in, at Verizon we have a really interesting perspective into planning for mobile learning, because normally when we're talking to educators, they're coming to us after they're kind of already in the process of deploying mobile learning, and a lot of times the questions they come to us with is really centered around what maybe they didn't do on the front end of their strategy. And it may just be in casual conversations with educators that we've developed a relationship with. So what I'm going to talk about today is really geared towards the feedback we've been hearing from school districts as they're rolling out their mobile learning strategy. So we're going to touch on what we're hearing out in the field in regards to infrastructure, devices, common mistakes that they've made and that they've seen others made, and things they might do differently if they did it a second time, and some of the overlooked keys to success that they've been experiencing through their rollouts. And just to start at the beginning, really the first conversation that we end up getting involved with is in regards to infrastructure and having adequate connectivity and infrastructure in place for their mobile learning projects. Because so many people, when they start thinking about it, you know, at the very beginning, sometimes the first question that comes up is, well, you know, what kind of devices are your students using? And sometimes they kind of go down that path before making sure that the right technology infrastructure is in place. So for reasons of, you know, creating ease of adoption both by the staff and for students and getting them engaged, providing superior content and resources really takes the right technology and network plan. And what I've actually been hearing here in Arizona this week, as well as some recent events, is that districts are also trying to meet connectivity requirements for online testing. So trying to facilitate and encourage you all today to, you know, really build a team together that's having that conversation early on. And, you know, trying to bring down the walls a little bit between technology and instruction and district leadership to be able to all be included in that conversation so that the right expectations are set in terms of network and connectivity for a successful project. we put up here just a few questions that really kind of go in a lot of different directions in terms of talking to IT staff and kind of starting to develop that conversation early on in the process, which is, trying to find out what kind of support that IT might need in moving into a mobile learning environment. And whether or not, where we're at now, what's the status today? Do we have a reliable internet as it stands? Do we have backup plans for our connections? Is there enough bandwidth? And do we have a way to monitor, manage the bandwidth? And a lot of people don't really, IT normally will be thinking about this, but creating that as a conversation amongst the team sometimes can kind of be a challenge. And I think it's really important for everyone involved, every stakeholder in a mobile learning implementation, to kind of understand and think through some of these questions together as a group. And lastly, are there any academic areas that don't have wireless coverage currently that we need to address or speak to? Regarding devices, strangely enough that it's not really about the device. There's many takes on what device is cutting edge, whether it's a Google Chromebook or, an Android tablet or an iPad or whatever. But it's really about the students. It's about teaching them and instructing them in a way that makes sense for them. So a lot of the questions we've been getting, as we are putting devices out into different districts around the country is, can you provide a way to monitor these devices, or what do we need to do to make sure we can install software remotely? Do the students have access to all the resources they need through this? And do you have a way to make sure that students can't change settings on these that shouldn't be changed? Have you seen other districts maybe that have a system to check out their laptops to users? Which, interestingly enough, on a visit here to a Sunnyside Unified School District today, got a chance to go in and actually see some of their repair rooms. They actually have repair rooms that are at the actual school level with teams where they've got a process of where the students go in and they, fill out a form, they drop off their laptop for repair, and they track it through that work order, if you would. They even have very kind of loose but service level agreements on the amount of time they've got to turn around those devices back to the students if there's a challenge or a problem. So we actually have the opportunity every day to talk to districts that are already doing this, and that's why we want to provide ourselves as a resource. Even though we don't have all the answers, we talk to a lot of districts, and we've got some districts that have phenomenal answers that they came to by, trial and error. Additionally, is there a way to be able to have a comprehensive inventory to record all of your laptops or tablets or whatever that device may be? And, do we have the ability to easily look up every device that a student has? Sorry, it seemed that there was a bit of a challenge there on one of our slides. So a couple of the common pitfalls, and they're out there, but the two most common we've been hearing, and I've been trying to really track this and taking, fastidious notes, if you would, when we're talking to customers and also other vendors out in the mobile learning space about, what do you hear as being the common pitfalls? And, both of them really are geared around communication. One is, I put it here as getting the cart before the horse, but, not having a clearly defined vision that you're communicating to your team, to your teachers, and to the community, students, and parents from the very beginning, and using that to drive how you construct a team and a plan to implement mobile learning. And that the device rollout should really be a last step. It's in the planning phases, looking ahead, and really being able to communicate a clear vision of what you want a perfect environment of instruction for your students to look like. And the other was really just forgetting the human element involved, that when you go from having 500 end users, we'll say teachers, classroom instructors, that IT are having to support, and moving into a world where they may have to be, supporting 5,000 end users, that sometimes the human element involved there isn't really taken into consideration. Or from a professional development standpoint, are we providing tools and resources through PD that really address the cultural shift that our district's making by making a move to one-to-one learning? To be prepared to address and really communicate and resolve the fears, concerns, excitement that's going on in the community around your mobile learning process. Step by step by step, and communicating not just the successes, but the challenges that you're running through in the process so that everyone's on the same page, and also kind of prevent those people that might want to step up and go, oh, see, we had a problem. We knew that something was going to go wrong. If you're communicating through that entire process, it kind of reduces the propensity of that type of opinion coming out while you're working out all of the kinks, if you would. Another one, and I don't want to miss this, is just the fact that kids are going to be kids, and that there are ways to incent responsibility and respond to misuse, but understand early, especially early on in an implementation. You can see some device loss, you can see some misuse of technology, but the more students are pointed by and communicated to that this is how they are going to be engaged moving forward, and then it's a privilege and a responsibility, and there's excitement around what we're doing. Students tend to, and we've actually seen it out here in Sunnyside, Unified this week, they really grab hold of it with both hands, and they will take it on and say, they start feeling like they're privileged to be involved in it, as long as the communication's in place to help them adopt that attitude. Regarding infrastructure, there's a few considerations that we wanted to share with you today that sometimes you may or may not think about. But one of them is having backup solutions. The best network implementation, the best strategies and solutions out there, occasionally something can happen and go wrong. And when there's standardized testing or something involved where you can't lose that connectivity without having to start the students again on a process or whatever, make sure you understand, what your district's network backup solution is or what you need to do to implement one so that you've got that connectivity continuity available all the time and a backup should anything go wrong. Also, really having a firm plan regarding securing the mobile access, the connectivity to the internet, whether it's a mobile device management platform or maybe it's upgrading, changing, filtering content and things at the district level. Those are some things that if you need ideas on it, like I said, we may not always be the answer, but we know a lot of great people that have really great answers. And we want to engage in that conversation with you and point you to customers that are already doing it or have already overcome some of those challenges. Also, managing the Wi-Fi services, having a plan and a strategy in place and really understanding, if you're not an IT person, how that's actually happening in your district so that as challenges and things come up, you're not caught off guard, but you've got a full, solid awareness, and so does the rest of your team, of how that's taking place. And lastly, intelligent networks that can really provide connectivity and user analytics in regards to how much bandwidth you're using, how to optimize the network that you've got, and hopefully reduce your costs moving forward by using those analytics to make decisions on, how you may expand, reduce, change, or augment your current network configuration in Wi-Fi and providing connectivity to students. And we want to share just a few resources that will support that we offer. One, of course, just as a corporate entity, we have a lot of device partners and connection solutions out there that we provide to a lot of different districts based on their needs. But what a lot of people may not know about is we've got a phenomenal foundation. I actually set up our Thingfinity website that you'll all get in the deck when this is over that provides some great professional development resources for teachers that are surrounding mobile learning. And we've got a lot of projects going on through the foundation regarding an innovative schools project where we're going out and helping support some schools around the country that are implementing mobile learning and providing some devices and things, and we're collecting data from that to be able to share and tell you about the successes that we're seeing other schools have around the country. And we also have a few strategic partners that we work with, like Curriculum Loft, Stoneware, iSchool, that do everything from, one-to-one planning services, professional development, devices, content management, you name it. But we've got a lot of friends out in the space that, we want to be able to introduce you to so they can provide support that maybe in areas we can't, even though we get a lot of questions on it. And also the great organizational resources, one of which is joining us today. I know Marie from COSN will be on here in just a minute, but COSN's a great organization. If you haven't gotten involved, you really need to, both from an IT perspective, but they've also got some great programs, support, and resources for superintendents. This week I'm actually at a Digital Promise event out here in Arizona, which is also a really great organization. A very, I would say, instructionally driven organization, but they've got a wonderful platform and resources to allow educators, superintendents of things, and also directors of instruction and IT directors to collaborate together and share ideas. And lastly, the Foundation for Excellence in Education. If you don't know about them, you need to look them up. They've got a great project called Digital Learning Now, and that group is actually doing a lot to try and influence both budgetary alignment, ideas, and strategies at the state level in departments of ed and things around the country, and they're a great resource for you as well. So our goal here is just to kind of give you some ideas and get you thinking about some of these things. And I know Marie's going to come up and here in a minute and be able to actually give you kind of COSN's strategy behind a lot of this, which is amazing and really, I think, it's going to be enlightening for a lot of people today. So I hope this is a little bit to get you started and whet your appetite. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Dennis.
Thank you, Tracy. Some great points to consider. Our next speaker is Marie Biereda, Project Director for the Consortium for School Networking's Leadership for Mobile Learning Initiative. She's a nationally recognized authority on mobile learning, and she's the founder of Emergence LLC and a 25-year veteran executive leader in high-tech development. So please welcome Marie.
Thank you so much, Dennis. And Tracy, what a wonderful introduction and context for what really is the landscape for mobile learning today. It's an honor to be here with Verizon, and I very much recommend anyone who's interested in mobile learning take a look at what Verizon and their foundation is doing. Terrific, terrific work. As Liz and Dennis said, I am the project director for COSN's Leadership for Mobile Learning Initiative. And COSN is a consortium for school networking, and it's the professional association for district-level technology leaders. And as such, we have access to and membership of lots and lots of really successful trailblazing districts that are successfully implementing mobile learning on the ground in the trenches right now. And our initiative is intended to help develop the resources to reduce the barriers for mobile implementation, both to help the leading districts, but also to distribute what they've learned and make that accessible to the rest of our memberships. And what's fascinating is that as we've been working with these, really amazing CTOs and CIOs, is that at COSN, we are seeing the exact same trends as Tracy was just talking about that Verizon has been seeing in the work with their districts. And so we've taken advantage of the experience that these CTOs and CIOs have to be able to hopefully be able to provide some context and some resources that will be helpful to others who are starting to look at mobile learning as a serious at-scale initiative, as opposed to 3 or 4 years ago when we were just looking at pilots and trying to decide whether mobile devices were tools or toys. Some of the top themes, very similar. I'm going to talk today about infrastructure. I'm going to emphasize the necessity to design for capacity when you develop your infrastructure. I'm going to talk about future-proofing your infrastructure, which is something I think is underemphasized in a lot of the conversation that's happening today. And I'm also going to point you to one of COSN's resources, which is the Smart Education Networks by Design, or SEND, guidelines and checklists that really go into quite a bit of detail on how to develop infrastructure for mobile learning and for one-to-one initiatives. We're going to talk about devices, and interestingly enough, how even though many districts start off their conversations by thinking about devices, that is usually a red flag, that how critical it is for devices to follow the design of teaching and learning in a given school district. And I have been given permission from COSA, and I'm very grateful for this, to preview with you some resources for mobile learning that will be released over the next several weeks to the next couple of months. And among these is the Administrator's Guide to Mobile Learning, which places device selection into the context of the rest of mobile learning implementation. I'm going to talk in a fair amount of detail about some of the common pitfalls that we're seeing out there. Some of the most common mistakes that are made is, as Tracy discussed, putting pedagogy before technology, or failing to put pedagogy before technology, rather. That what a lot of districts find it easy to do is to say, hey, we need devices, let's go get some, as opposed to really thinking through how they're going to be used. There's also often an error of not having a single point of coordination, which means that things fall through the cracks, and the implementation tends to be more bumpy than is necessary. And also that it's hard to manage communications and manage expectations among your community, among your parents and students, and among the press. Another common pitfall is the inability to take risk. In a lot of districts, in a lot of environments, even though risk is given lip service, in practice that's a very difficult thing to do, and without it, transformation is pretty much impossible. The resource I'm going to preview for you on the common pitfalls is a graphic that we have developed, really distilling the wisdom of some of our rockstar CTOs and CIOs about what are the most common mistakes, what are the most common pitfalls, and what are the important things to do at each step of mobile learning. And finally, I'm going to talk about what are some of the keys to success. And you will hear over and over from every successful district that first and foremost, it's about culture change. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit. And I'm also going to share with you a resource where we're starting to develop a set of brief videos from a number of leading districts that will give insight onto specific questions of implementing mobile learning, including what is the top advice that you would give to any district who's just embarking on this process. And culture change first, planning first, vision first is the number one recurring theme there. But before I get into talking about today's urgent issues and challenges, I want to mention some of tomorrow's big pitfalls that are out there just waiting and that I don't think are getting enough discussion. It's really easy to focus on the current situation because there's a lot of excitement about using mobile devices. There's a lot of pressure from parents and students and school boards either to implement mobile learning or to not implement mobile learning. There's the requirements that are placed by the imminent online assessments. There are worries about the public embarrassments and setbacks that we see in the news. There are concerns about data privacy, and there are worries about how to keep up with technology evolution. It is critical to create an environment that is flexible enough to evolve as requirements change. So you may recall, 10 years ago, districts purchased computers for computer labs, and that was a huge capital investment. And when they started to realize that, 2 hours a week in a computer lab is not adequate for student access, and we needed to move to one-to-one implementations, not only was the money already spent that could be spent on mobile devices, but the overall infrastructure was set up to work with landline connectivity. And so if you had to deal with intermittent connectivity, multiple devices accessing at once, and so on, their entire infrastructure was not set up to deal with that. Today, if we're assuming that mobile implementations just means tablet carts or tablets or netbooks or whatever that are used only in school, I think it's very easy for districts to paint themselves into a similar investment corner. I think that infrastructure is being driven a lot by critical short-term needs, and those are critical. I mean, you can't ignore them, but it's really important to look at a longer-term roadmap of how mobile devices will fit into a mixed environment in the future that's going to really serve the vision, mission, and needs of a given school district. And I think the biggest elephant in the room right now is the shift that's happening in mobile learning. It used to be that mobile learning really just meant learning that was mediated by mobile devices like smartphones, tablets, or mini computers. But that's not necessarily the case anymore. Now it really has to do with 24/7, 365 access. And that means that the students are the ones who are mobile, and they're probably going to be using a combination of devices, school devices and their own devices. And this is really critical, a combination of networks, both the Wi-Fi networks that you're establishing at school, but also cellular data networks in order to be able to serve their 24/7, 365 needs. And so you need to look at whether or not your network is really designed to grow with those needs as they become increasingly urgent. As this happens, equity is going to become more and more of an issue. Personal connected devices have such incredible potential for teaching and learning that the gap between those who have it and those who don't is only going to continue to widen. And that's a difference in kind, not just degree. It's much like the difference between having kids access computer labs for a couple of hours versus having their own device available throughout the entire school day, except even more so. And that means that schools are going to become increasingly required to deal with inequities of access. And that means that you're going to need to plan for a mix of networks, both Wi-Fi and cellular, school-managed and parentally controlled. And so I worry about the investment based on price in Wi-Fi-only devices. And I completely understand the cost trade-offs, but what concerns me more than anything is that those purchases are going to lead to a myopic infrastructure development that's going to make it harder to upgrade the whole system in the future when the need for 24/7, 365 access becomes inescapable. That said, I would like to talk a little bit about one of these first themes, and that's infrastructure. Clearly, one of the issues is to design and test for capacity. That's where a lot of districts and schools who have been trying to do this on an ad hoc basis have fallen down. We have resources for designing your infrastructure at COSN's SEND initiative, and there's a link right there. The checklist and guidelines provide information about things like alignment and integration with district vision, mission, and goals, defining your performance requirements, network design considerations like coverage and capacity and scalability and WAN-LAN topology, and even the issues that you run into in schools due to the construction materials that are used there. It also talks about network management and quality of service and mobile device management and mobile application management and identity and access management and privacy and data protection technologies and policies and so on. So I invite you to check that out for perhaps a little bit deeper dive into specific infrastructure development issues. I want to mention, again, this notion of future-proofing. I've listed here a number of possible scenarios that may happen in the next year, the next 3 years, the next 5 years. Maybe not all of them are going to apply, but what I would like you to think about is, as you develop infrastructure, how would you expand it? How would it scale? How would it be expandable if some of these scenarios start to take place? If you have a plan for that, there's certainly no need to implement it currently if your current requirements don't call for it. But in thinking about what it's going to look like in the future, you're going to be able to develop a very robust infrastructure that will adapt as your requirements change. And we absolutely know that when it comes to technology and how rapidly things are evolving, that change is inevitable. So, devices. It's kind of funny. Most concern about device choice are red herrings, even though it's the first thing that often comes up. To share a little bit about that, I have received permission to give you a sneak peek at our soon-to-be-released revamped guide for administrators. This guide takes this and other questions and puts them into a context for success. What we hear from top CTOs and CIOs is that if your first question is about devices, that's an immediate red flag that you're unlikely to be successful. Naive districts always come with the two questions: what device should I buy, and how can I pay for it? And this is indicative of a culture where the device, it looks like a novelty and an add-on. whereas to successful district is a tool for really redefining teaching and learning. And I know that, we use those words. We talk about transformation, we talk about redefining, and it almost starts to lose its meaning. But these districts are really doing that. They are changing what they value in education, and they're changing the goals of education for their students based on the values of their community, and they're changing how that education happens. It's very concrete. These districts spend up to 18 months thinking really carefully and articulating carefully what their schools, their classrooms, homework, and hallways are going to look like after the transformation. They talk about what they think the expected benefits are going to be. And after that, the choice of devices to support those use cases is usually fairly straightforward, and the will to pay for them out of existing budgets by choosing things not to spend money on anymore is strong. Once districts have done that work, they really can't make a wrong choice about devices. But there are two sides of devices to think about. Mobile devices, personal devices, connected devices that a student has access to all the time are the key for increasing student agency, ownership, and voice. And for a lot of schools, a lot of districts, those are some of the new values that are non-negotiable. However, they are not great for content creation, and they are even worse for content editing. So if you want to come up with a polished end product, mobile devices aren't mature enough yet to do that particularly well. And so having access to laptops or even desktops that provide better editing and content creation capabilities is incredibly useful and complementary. And then what you need to look at as a district is, which of those goals do you value the most, or how do you provide a mix of those given the resources at your disposal at a given time? One thing to keep in mind is that a lot of students say that device responsiveness becomes a core factor. So if you have a netbook with a lot of IT wear on it that is extremely slow to log in with, that may not maintain its Wi-Fi connections very well, that accesses the internet slowly, that even if you're trying to do work where a keyboard and screen would normally be preferred, if your tablet is more responsive, then students are more likely to want to work with a tablet under those circumstances. So getting into what are some of the pitfalls of mobile learning, this graphic, which I again have been graciously granted permission to share with you a little bit in advance, talks about each of the steps of mobile learning. And those steps are planning, implementing, and continual improvement. And for each of those, we talk about what are the most common mistakes, what are the important things to do, and what are the key pitfalls. We've also got, as you may see, a big green Take Action button on this graphic, which links directly to relevant resources within the Administrator's Guide for Mobile Learning. So the first step is planning. The most common mistake that people make is putting technology ahead of pedagogy. It's really easy as a district to fall short in building a real vision of how learning will change with technology and what the expected benefits are. The problem is that when you fail to do that, the district is at risk of not meeting the unspoken stakeholder expectations. And that means they're at huge risk for suffering the resulting public backlash, whether it's just from parents or if it's very publicly in the press. Some of the other pitfalls associated with that are just falling for the hype. Oh, look, tablets, cool, beautiful, kids love them. They're all going to be engaged. Put them in the classroom, everything will be beautiful. Or even blindly following other districts who are beginning to implement, but without establishing your own vision first. Another pitfall is planning for the mobile learning in isolation first and then trying to get stakeholder buy-in after the fact. Or depending mostly on vendors to design your technical or human infrastructure. You need to be true to your own vision and really need to avoid cookie-cutter solutions. Even though most vendors really do have a lot of expertise to bring to the table, without being able to apply that expertise to your particular vision, you may not end up with the solutions and technologies that best support your own vision. Huge pitfall is the failures of transparency or communication, both to your stakeholders and to the outside community. Tell them why you're doing this, and then tell them again and again and again, why are we going mobile? It's not just the shiny devices. And another pitfall is letting your limited resources stop you. Be creative. Do what you can for now, and over time work towards equity. So what are the important things to do in the planning stage to avoid stumbling? Well, the first one, of course, is to pull together a substantive vision. And the next is to be really clear on what are the specific benefits that you expect out of the transition to mobile learning. Those two things are going to guide your day-to-day decision-making, your communication, and your expectations management. You also need to bring old policies into the digital age. That's critical. You need to figure out how to keep it funded indefinitely. A 2-year grant is going to leave you with a cliff that may be very difficult to overcome. You need to design in advance your approach for your technology infrastructure, for your professional development, and critically for continual iteration and improvement. And also, as you plan, as you roadmap, be mindful of human fairness. Plan how to mitigate inequity today and eliminate it in the future, but don't let it stop you if you can't get there perfectly to start with. Second step is the implementation step. And mostly, implementation is about project management. That doesn't mean that there aren't a lot of pitfalls out there waiting to happen. So the biggest mistake people make is they allow the implementation to be siloed. They don't see it as one cohesive transformation, and they don't have a project plan or a project coordinator. And that means that it's so easy to get blindsided by problems that are completely predictable, like, oh goodness, we didn't realize that everybody would be connecting to the internet all at once, and not just with the devices they brought, but with the devices in their pocket as well. Or you may discover that the digital resources that a vendor sold you may not be adequate to meet your needs. And so hugely preventable if you think through how you're going to be using the tablets for teaching and learning. You may find that parents are a lot more uncomfortable with the student use of technology than you had expected. All of these kinds of problems, by having a single vision, a single point of coordination, and going through transparent communication, are all avoidable issues. Some other pitfalls in this stage include implementation by committee, right? Same thing. Somebody has to pull it all together. Also, implementation by top-down mandate. I think we all know that anything that comes from above and that hasn't been adapted by grassroots is set to fail. Going to scale with an untested approach is going to be extremely messy. Now, some districts may actually choose to do that. They may say, we are going to learn as we go along. We're going to put devices in the hands of every child before we do pilots. And that can work, but there's going to be there will be mistakes along the way. There will be stumbles in the road, and there will be public outcry, and there will be backlash. And so it's necessary to be really prepared for that if you're taking that approach, as opposed to starting smaller, doing pilot projects, working out all the kinks, and knowing that by the time you go to scale, it'll be relatively smooth, and the kinds of stumbles that occur are ones that you're quite qualified at that point to address. Another pitfall is focusing too much on other people's best practices instead of a culture of innovation. Best practices are a red herring anymore. There is no best practice. There is no one way to implement mobile learning. It really depends on a particular classroom, a particular student, a particular teacher, school, community. When we talk about the personalization of learning through the use of mobile devices, that's a real thing. And what that means is that every classroom, every teacher is now an innovator who tries new things, who sees what works, who gets rid of the things that don't work, and who does what's best for students in a given situation where they are. And so trying to focus on the way that other people did mobile learning will lead you to a checklist of acts to go through, but it won't change your way of doing business day to day. Whereas if you focus on a culture of innovation where it's safe to take risks, where it's encouraged to learn new ways to teach and learn, that's where the transformation happens. Other pitfalls include not updating your policies to reflect digital realities of today, not communicating adequately with parents and students, having flaky technology, insufficient bandwidth, slow devices, that kind of thing, getting into unsustainable purchasing practices, or, of course, failing to communicate expectations. And the third step, continually improving. So mobile learning never ends. An implementation for mobile learning isn't a one and done. It isn't ever, ever truly over. What that means is that the biggest risk to improvement is to do nothing. It means that the transition is one to a culture of innovation, which means continually trying new things, continually learning from them, keeping what works and discarding what doesn't. And if you don't have the top-down support to make this culture change, then the transformation literally isn't going to happen. You may be using mobile devices, but they're not going to change the way teaching and learning happens in your district. And in some districts, those kinds of risks literally are too risky, right? You're not going to be able to just step out on your own and make those changes. But when there is district support, when it is a district-wide initiative, when there is an understanding of a new vision and a transformational mindset, then, a little bit of magic happens, honestly. So the pitfalls in this improvement has to do, first of all, with impatience. You have to recognize that it takes 3 to 4 years to shift practice and really see the final results there. Obviously, a lack of transparency. If you're not bringing all of your stakeholders along on the journey, they are not going to be able to understand when you point out what the benefits are beyond test scores, and they're not going to understand when stumbles happen and why the way you address it is a good way to go and is going to solve the problem for the foreseeable future. Another pitfall is punishing the poor outcomes of good experiments, and even when there's lip service to transformation, that happens. Also, conversely, failing to recognize the good outcomes that break expectations. So you expect things to work one way, you get something different, but actually it's a thing of beauty. You need to embrace the counterintuitive when it comes to mobile learning. Another pitfall is not doing a lot of real experimentation. Try testing with hypotheses and control groups and so on. And of course, failing to learn and iterate based on outcomes. So what do you do to continually improve? Well, first thing is you share really widely the progress towards the vision. And talk about that in rich depth, not just test scores, but not just attendance and behavior, but really shifts in student agency, student ownership, and capacities. Track your outcomes, analyze root causes, make and test hypotheses, both from the micro scale to the macro. Recognize and celebrate unexpected results, both the good and bad. That's where the real learning happens. And of course, iterate and improve your practice, but also iterate and improve your vision. Okay. I'm going to apologize here if I am bragging again, but our COSIN Leadership for Mobile Learning initiative really has some mobile learning rock stars participating. And, I couldn't be more honored and humbled to work with them and learn from them. It includes districts like Forsyth County, Georgia, Illinois Consolidated High School District 230, Mooresville Graded School District, Houston ISD, St. Vrain Valley, and really lots more. And the leaders from this district have not only shared their wisdom with us, but they've been gracious enough to answer the top burning questions about implementing mobile learning, and they've done it in short 1 to 3 minute videos so that you can go and take a look at what do 6 or 7 different diverse districts with different needs do to fund their devices, to choose their devices, to set their policy, to create a vision, all of the things that are questions that get brought up. And I'm giving you just a tiny, tiny sneak preview that this exists here. The first question that we've asked is advice for other districts. You can find this through the mobile learning website, but right now it is just starting to get populated. In a few months, we will release this officially, and there will be a lot more content there for you to take a look at. But in the meantime, the top advice that they've given us is they said, first, of course, start with a vision and take your time. Make sure your vision is developed as much from the ground up as it is from the top down. The second thing that they emphasize over and over is to manage expectations and be transparent in your communications. Provide a context for explaining your successes beyond test scores, and also for addressing bumps in the road to parents, students, your community, and the press. And the third is, when you start implementing, work internally with your evangelists, whether it's small pilot or a larger group. start with the people who are really interested and who want to do it, and then evolve from there. A lot of educators really need to see new things work with students before they become enthusiastic about it. And note that the questions about what devices to buy or how to fund the program don't even make their top 10 lists. So I'm going to turn it over to Q&A. You can see on this slide a link to COSM's Mobile Leads. That's the Leadership for Mobile Learning site. You can kind of get sneak peeks on some of these resources on links from there, but expect them to move around a little bit over the next few weeks and months before they're finally released. So I'm going to turn it back over to Dennis.
Thank you, Marie. That was really great. Excuse me. I thought it was interesting that I heard a few key themes that were common to both of your presentations, such as putting the learning before the technology and not starting with the device as your focus, and also the need to plan carefully for your infrastructure needs and to future-proof your networks. The first question that I'd like to ask you is on that second point. How could school leaders determine how much bandwidth is enough? I guess the simple answer to that is you can never have enough bandwidth, but obviously, schools have to balance, cost versus, their needs. So what advice would you have in terms of, is there a certain number of access points per student within a building or other metrics that districts can use when looking at, wanting to be able to do online testing and video and things like that?
So I would point folks, first of all, to the CETA Broadband Imperative Model. So CETA is the State Education Technology Directors Association, and they recommend in kilobits per second per user for really transforming teaching and learning, you need 100 kbps per user. That aside, when you're putting access points inside a school, network planning is really an important part of your network design, and it depends on a number of factors, not just population, but also what the geography of your school looks like and what kind of materials it's built out of and so on. And so there's no substitute for putting up access points in your classrooms and testing how that works, where you have dead spots and so on. I've heard of schools where before they do their implementation, they have people walking around with iPads and carts of iPads to see, what does our access look like here in this part of the school, in this hallway, in that corner of the classroom, and so on. I think as a minimum, every classroom needs an access point. But beyond that, of course, it depends on your population and, and how close you can get to the CETA recommendations in terms of your overall bandwidth.
Thanks, Marie. Tracy, do you have any thoughts on that question?
I honestly, there's nothing else I can add to it. I do think that, and I see it a lot, we get asked to do it. We actually send our network teams out periodically to walk campuses on behalf of educators who are saying, we're trying to figure out, where we need to expand, where we need to enhance, what you can do to help. And so there are a lot of times that we'll send some of our network staff out to help them do that. Because, it's hard. It's hard to, especially when you're looking at a larger district and they've got a lot of different facilities that each have their own needs. Very much like what Marie was saying, the geography of the campus makes a big difference. So, yeah, I think that she's dead on, and that's something that we actually encourage and try to make resources available to people to help them do that as much as possible.
You both had alluded to the fact that mobile learning doesn't stop within the walls of the classroom, and to be thinking about how you can extend that connectivity outside the school building as well to students' homes. I'm wondering what resources and suggestions you have for how to approach that. And Tracy, maybe we could start with you.
Sure. I mean, there's a number of different solutions, and sometimes it's, providing a connection directly to the student. The connection may be on their device, an embedded connection. At other times, it may be providing some hotspots. We've got a lot of districts now that are actually designating certain areas of their community, and it could be in a library, it could be in a Starbucks, it could be in a McDonald's where they're actually sponsoring hotspots that are, district branded. They're filtered so that the connectivity is secure and students are having, they're having the same protection to access the internet that they would if they were sitting on campus. But they're scattering those hotspots throughout the community a little bit, and really they're using it also as a public relations tool to be able to reach out and bring people into their school district community. So that's a great way of doing it. It's a really economical way of doing it. You'll see others, and we talked about this actually during our last webcast, but doing it on school buses, providing connectivities, hotspots on the school buses as well to try to extend that day. So, I mean, there's a variety of different ways to do it. There's districts that have done it by literally setting up their own little, storefronts, if you would, in different areas of larger communities. So, and not just that, there's ways to fund that as well, because a lot of people are, they're concerned about the cost, which we get. And so doing partnerships with community organizations, partnerships with local companies and things that want to help sponsor that, and a lot of them are more than happy to do that because that's an opportunity for them to show the philanthropic side, if you would, of their organizations in the community, but also, put their name behind something that's really going to impact their future workforce. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. We've got a number of different ideas that we've seen around the country. If you need ideas, make sure to reach out to me. We can point you to some really great solutions, but there's a variety there.
Thank you. Marie, how would you respond to that? What are you hearing from schools on?
Yeah, so I would completely agree with Tracy. I love the way that schools are being creative and making sure that to whatever degree is possible, they're providing access to all their students, even if it requires hotspots, even if it requires opening their libraries at night, which of course has some really interesting side effects. You find families where a school-provided device literally is their only real internet connection, and so parents, families will go and sit in their car outside McDonald's for hours just to be able to access the internet, which is a huge improvement. But at the same time, I really want to pay attention to the fact that there's a huge inequity here. We always knew that there's a big difference between kids who had computers at home and kids who had to wait for their 20 minutes at the library to be able to look something up or access the internet. And that divide is growing larger and larger. The difference between honest, true 24/7 access and being able to go to a hotspot and having occasional access is fairly dramatic when it comes to a student's ability to take ownership of their learning, to be able to collaborate with their peers outside of school, to be able to access resources, and it's going to have a significant impact. And so, again, I want to reiterate that it's critical not to let those inequities stop you from doing what you can do today, and absolutely take advantage of all these resources. They're brilliant, but also to really make it a priority to plan your infrastructure build out for the future to allow for the kind of equity of access that all our kids are going to need regardless of zip code, and to look at and advocate for the funding that can make that a reality.
Thank you. Marie, you had mentioned in your presentation that changing the culture of your school is critical around mobile learning. Can you expand on this, and what successful practices have you seen in making this kind of cultural shift, and what are some of the keys to success in doing that?
Sure. That could be its own discussion. I could spend hours on that. But in very, very, very short, the biggest cultural change involves letting go of some control. It means letting go of control from teachers to students and allowing students to become more independent agents and be able to do more participation in learning. So just a simple example of that. It used to be in a classroom, if a teacher was doing some direct instruction and a student had a question, you could possibly ask somebody to go to the back of the room, boot up a computer, find the answer. You could possibly say, let's take a note, let's look at that individually. But in a classroom where everyone has a mobile device, what will happen is that students will start to look up relevant information, share it in as just a normal part of the conversation, and it takes the level of that instruction up a notch, up to the next bar. At the same time, you need building leadership that will allow teachers to experiment and learn with how to personalize their practice and how to collaborate with each other in improving their collective community of practice. And that means also letting go of some control. Rather than having prescribed curriculum, you now really have educating and teaching that is personalized for the student and has personalized the educator's practice. And at the district level, there's a similar kind of letting go of allowing different buildings to understand what are the needs of that particular building and the parents and students that are involved with it at that particular time.
Great, thank you. We're almost out of time, but I just want to ask one final question of our panelists. Any last thoughts that you want to leave for participants on how to make mobile learning a success? Tracy, can we start with you?
Absolutely. The one thing I would say is, I use the word collaborate a lot, but I think it really needs to happen at every level. And just as a side note, I actually talked to an educator this morning who was talking to me about the importance of leveraging their public relations office as they've been doing their implementation and getting really strong buy-in from the community, and in a way that actually allows the district some wiggle room, if you would, in setting expectations in a way, well, parents expect a few mistakes. And so I would just say, really collaborate at the district level with the field. I love what Marie said earlier about, planning from the top, not only from the top down, but also from the bottom up, and provide an environment for, and expect people to, things are going to get louder. There's a lot of collaboration that takes place around mobile learning, both among students, among staff, teachers, parents, and, and to not be afraid of it.
Thank you. Marie?
I'm going to echo, don't be afraid. It's going to be messy. It's going to be kind of crazy. Things are going to happen that you don't expect. You're going to find yourself in a different world. But I can tell you, every teacher I've talked to who has undergone this transformation tells me I could never go back to teaching any other way. And I think that's a huge endorsement and a good reason to stay the course.
Well, thank you so much. You both had some great insights, and I hope the participants have learned as much from this event as I have. I'm going to turn it back over to Liz now for a few final housekeeping items.
Yes, thank you guys very much. As I said, this webinar was recorded, so I will work as soon as this is done. I will start exporting that and should have that up on the site at the earliest tomorrow, at the latest Monday. You'll get a follow-up email as well to tell you about the recording, and you'll get a copy of the slides. And that is really all I have for my housekeeping. So thank you guys for attending, and thank you very much, and have a great day.